Welcome to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman here with Ryan D'Amico.
Let's switch over to the big boys here and talk about Week 5 in the NFL.
Week 5 of the NFL. We'll start out with the Thursday night game. Close game between the Patriots and Buccaneers. The Patriots pulling out 19-14. And some of the biggest news, I know we talked about this a little bit pre-show, the return of Doug Martin. So he got plenty of action right from the start, got 74 yards, scored a touchdown. I know we were talking about I made a desperation play because I lost Dalvin Cook on one of my teams at the running back position. I tried to fit Jaquiz Rodgers in as a replacement. That didn't work out this week. Some of my other plays did work out a lot better, but that was not one of my good calls this week. The Patriots continue to impress me offensively, how many different guys they get involved. They got Chris Hogan, Danny Amendola, Brandon Cooks, James White, a lot of action in the passing game. And then Nick Folk, he's already been cut since that game, went 0 for 3 on his field goals. Obviously, if you do a little math, that's the difference in the game there for the Buccaneers, and that's why he's out of the job. So those were the biggest things that really stood out to me this week.
Yeah, I watched pretty much this entire game on Thursday night. I had some rooting interest. I was going up against Tom Brady in one of my leagues. He didn't have a quote-unquote Tom Brady game, 300 yards and only one touchdown. And that was ultimately the difference of the game, was them not converting in the red zone. Got to the red zone a handful of times and just could not punch it in. Had to settle for some Stephen Gostkowski field goals. He was able to obviously be reliable and knock through 4 field goals. But, that was the difference. Was I thought once they got down there and Tampa's defense was really able to kind of clamp down and limit them to only 3 points, which kept them in the game. And, look, Tampa even had a chance to win at the end. I mean, really, they were, I think, at the 25 or 30. I think they're at the 25-yard line, had a final chance to throw to the end zone. And, sorry, you got Deshaun Jackson, you got Mike Evans. I'm not so sure I'm throwing the ball with the game on the line to a rookie and O.J. Howard, who is a decent player. He's a good athlete, but he clearly showed why he's still a rookie. Jameis throws the ball on an anticipation route, and he doesn't even have his head around and is even looking for the ball. So tough loss there. Definitely a game that they should have had. You said Nick Folk, if he can make some field goals, they win that game. But I remember when training camp was going on and it was Nick Folk and Aguayo were battling it out. It was like deciding whether you like chicken shit or you like cow shit. Either way, it's shit. I mean, really, that's what basically, and that's why, like, at the time, I'm laughing to myself. I'm like, you're going to pick one of these guys to be your kicker, but guess what? They both suck. Like, eventually, and look, and it finally cost them a game. It finally cost them a game that they probably would have loved to have won against the Patriots. A Thursday night game on national television. And look, now you have kicking issues, and you don't even know what the situation is going to be there going forward. If you're going to get some reliability out of there, so tough sledding for the Buccaneers. 2-2 start to the season. I think a lot of people probably thought they were going to be a little bit better than that. Only scoring 14 points against that New England defense. Does that mean the Patriots got to figure it out defensively, or does that mean that Tampa is just kind of struggling right now?
I think it's more so on the Tampa side there. I do not think this Patriots team has it figured out. Like we said, some of that credit goes to Nick Folk not being able to finish for him. And the stats are there. Jameis Winston, he still threw for 334 yards. He threw a touchdown, no interceptions. Like I mentioned earlier, Doug Martin, 74 yards, only 13 carries, so almost 6 yards per carry there. They weren't being stopped by this Patriots defense.
And that's another thing. That's another thing, Zach. You bring up a good point. You reminded me. The play calling in that game was terrible. What'd you say? Doug Martin had 13 carries?
Yeah, 13 carries.
Dude, It seemed like every time he touched the ball, he at least got 4 or 5 yards. And they would run him, and then they wouldn't come back to him for another, 4 plays. They would get pass happy. And I'm watching the game thinking to myself, what are they doing? You need to run the ball here. Doug Martin's fresh. He looks good. He's running the ball well. He's getting a lot of yards per carry, and they just got pass happy. And I think that was another big factor in them losing the game personally.
Now, part of that, I think, factors into why I thought Jaquiz Rogers was a reasonable play. With Doug Martin coming off the suspension, we saw Le'Veon Bell come in late to after the end of training camp, and he was not himself the first couple weeks. I thought that might be the case with Doug Martin. That might be something the coaches were trying to make sure wasn't going to happen, that he gets overused after that time off, that they weren't going with him too much. Obviously, they didn't go Jaquiz Rogers' way like I was hoping, but they've really relied on that passing game with Jameis Winston throwing it 46 times through the game.
Yeah, that's just, in my opinion, it's just not a recipe for success. And when you're having success on the ground, you need to continue to run the ball. And they didn't, and they ultimately lose the game, and they fall to 2-2, and New England gets a big road win, and maybe they try to kind of right their ship here. Although it came out today, I don't know if you saw, Zach. I think it came out today. I don't remember seeing it before that apparently Tom Brady has an AC joint issue in his non-throwing shoulder, which obviously a lot better than his throwing shoulder, but he's a little dinged up. He'll obviously play, but
yeah, he's expected to play through it.
Just something to keep an eye on. I mean, if he gets sacked and he gets landed awkwardly on that shoulder, that's something to keep an eye on. So, never, Tom Brady goes out, you might as well kiss their season goodbye. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
I wouldn't go that far quite yet unless he goes out. They've had in the past, Jacoby Brissett played last year. They had Jimmy Garoppolo get some action.
But, no Edelman. The defense is bad. If Brady goes out, their season is done. Flat out. But then again, you can't say it. I guess you're right, because they play in the AFC East.
They do. Well, they're tied first right now.
Right.
With 2 other 3-2 teams.
Right, exactly.
The Jets and the Bills.
Right. It's crazy.
It is. That's one of the great things about the NFL. It's so unpredictable. There's crazy things that happen. No one expected the Patriots, Bills, and Jets to be tied for first place in that division.
5 weeks in. Crazy.
And from that point, we'll move to the Bills game. The other team I just mentioned that's tied with them, where they played the Cincinnati Bengals and they came out on the losing side in a 20-16 game where AJ Green just put a display on of what he does so well. 189 yards there and a touchdown for him. Clearly dominated the game. One guy we brought up last week, Joe Mixon for the Bengals there at the running back position. He's a rookie. He got a lot of carries last week, didn't do much with them, continued to get some good action and a much better game, although there's still much more to be desired, but 15 rushes, 51 yards, and a touchdown. He seems to continue climbing a little bit, and that's what I'd expect to continue ever since they replaced their offensive coordinator. He's been on a much better track to kind of dominate that backfield action. And on the Bills side, Zay Jones, I just do not understand. He's the only receiver they have pretty much, and he still doesn't get any action. He's got 1 catch for 9 yards. He was a little bit hyped up as a rookie here coming in. They lost Jordan Matthews. They just lost Charles Clay, who had a great start to the season. Basically, this team is LaShawn McCoy and nobody else.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Nick O'Leary was their leading receiver in the game, had the most targets, had the most yards. If you remember, Nick O'Leary was Jameis Winston's tight end at Florida State. Never wore gloves, which is a cool thing about Nick O'Leary. But, yeah, then you got Charles Clay, LaShawn McCoy, Brandon Tate, Mike Tolbert, all getting more yards and more receptions than Zay Jones. Great point. You brought him in here. At this point, you have to ask yourself, why? You're not even using the freaking guy. And, look, I just think that gets back to Tyrod Taylor. 20 of 37 for only 166 yards. Dude, you have 20 completions for only 166 yards. That's not very good. That yardage needs to be up more than that if you're completing 20 attempts. So,
but can you
look,
blame him? His best receiver
no, I know.
has been Charles Clay, and it's not close.
Sure. No, absolutely. You make a good point. LaShawn McCoy is, we say it every week, seemingly, it seems like, that he is the only thing that offense has. And speaking of offense, the Bengals, I mean, they're finally coming around. I mean, really, offensively, they're finally coming around after the offensive coordinator switch. It's a sight for sore eyes that the offensive coordinator, the new guy, comes in and says, okay, let's look at the roster. I have A.J. Green. We're going to throw him the ball. We're going to target him 13 times. He's going to have 7 receptions, 189 yards, and a touchdown. And like we mentioned in the previous week, Zach, it looked like Joe Mixon has finally established himself as the guy in Cincinnati in that backfield, the quote-unquote crowded backfield that I hear every week. Well, guess what? It's not really crowded when the guy gets 15 carries and the next closest guy is Andy Dalton with 5 attempts. So he's clearly the guy there. And look, had a nice game, got into the end zone. And Cincinnati, if they could have squeaked out that game against Green Bay when they lost in overtime, man, who knows where this season could have gone for them? Because look, they're still 2-3. No one's really doing anything in the AFC North. So this is a team, if they continue to get it together offensively, who knows where they could go? Do you think the Bengals can turn it around and maybe make a push to the playoffs, or do you think they're just going to kind of hover around 500 the rest of the year?
I think they're in a great position to be able to make that push. They're on the upswing right now. They're playing a lot better than they have. They've clearly made some good changes. They're going to their better players. Unlike, you look at the Ravens, who just have a weird group of pieces. And even though they're 3-2, that's not an intimidating force ahead of this Bengals team. Same thing with the Steelers. We just saw them look awful this week. That's a game we'll get to a little bit later. And they're also a game ahead of this Bengals team. So I think the playoffs are definitely within a shot for this Cincinnati team.
They got their work cut out for them, though, Zach. 4 out of their next 5 are on the road. The 4 road games. First, they start out this week at Pittsburgh, and then the remaining 3 road games there are at Jacksonville, at Tennessee, at Denver, all in succession. So, tough schedule coming up. Let's see how they get through that. Probably need to win. You probably need to take 3 out of those 5. I mean, really. So let's see if they can do it, because they have the talent, like we talk about constantly. They have the talent. So they get a big home win and try to turn this thing around.
We'll go to the Panthers and Lions game next. The Panthers moved to 4-1, and the most impressive thing to me was they did it through the passing game. Cam Newton had 7 rushes for 0 yards. Didn't gain any yards on the ground. 355 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. They put up 27 points against this Lions team, pulled out that 27-24 victory, which wasn't even quite that close. The Lions had 2 late touchdowns to put it within a field goal, but at one point the Carolina Panthers were up by 17. It was 27-10, and they started to give that up a little bit. They just got no help on the ground. Jonathan Stewart averaged 1.2 yards per carry, 18 rushes for 21 yards, which is pretty silly and extremely unhelpful there. So I'm very impressed at what Cam Newton did in this game, that he was able to spread it around. Ed Dixon led them in receiving with a monster game. Yeah. That's another kind of anomaly. I doubt we'll see him do that again, where he had 175 yards. Kelvin Benjamin and Devin Funchess continue to be very solid. They both had just over 50 yards and a touchdown. And that I'm impressed with this passing game here in Carolina.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, they've been coming along here. The running game is non-existent. I mean, awful. The running game is bad week after week, and it makes you wonder kind of what these defensive coordinators for the opposition are kind of game planning, because and how they can't seem to figure out the passing game with, I mean, like Ed Dixon and Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, some good players there, but none of those guys. I mean, I'm gonna be serious. None of those guys like flat out scare me. Like they're not like a DeAndre Hopkins or they're not like an AJ Green, someone like that. That I'm like, we have to know where this guy is constantly. But they're doing a good job spreading the ball around and getting everyone involved. And kudos to them because they're 4-1 and we were talking before we went on the air. They continue to win, and I'm just kind of flabbergasted as to how they keep doing it. And look, they play the Eagles this weekend, so I'll see them up close and personal on Thursday. So it'll be interesting to see that matchup. But this is a very good win for the Panthers to go into Detroit, a team that had been playing very, very well. That, like we said, was only 6 inches away from being undefeated and getting a big road win. And that's a tough one for Detroit because, like you said, you made a great point, Zach. This game was not as close as the final score indicated. 2 garbage time touchdowns made the game pretty close because Carolina dominated from start to finish for the most part.
And from that game, we'll move to the 0-5 New York Giants, who took yet another loss and a loss of all of their receiving threats, basically.
Isn't this great? Isn't it great having the Giants 0-5, though? I personally love it.
It does feel good. And I forgot about talking to you about this pre-show, but I believe in our NFL preview, you predicted the Giants for last place. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, absolutely. Because I had Cowboys first. I owned up and said I thought the Cowboys would win the division. I had the Eagles second, and then I had Washington third, Giants fourth, I believe. So I thought they would take a step back. Not sure I thought it would be this bad though.
It is rough. They just have no running game, and the receiver injuries killed them because Odell Beckham's been the only thing they've had. Even with the season-ending injury during this game, he still had 97 yards and a touchdown. Beyond him, their second leading receiver was Roger Lewis, and I don't know anything about Roger Lewis. I don't expect him to carry this team. Brandon Marshall is lost for the season. Sterling Shepard had an injury, although he should be back at some point soon. They can't get anything through the running game, although Orleans Darkwa had 69 yards on 8 rushes. He scored a touchdown as well. That's the first spark of pretty much anything that they've had at that running back position. Paul Perkins was a bust. Shane Vereen kind of does what he does, gets a couple catches, but nothing too exciting. They seem to be trying to get Wayne Gallman some action there. He got 11 rushes for 57 yards. Pretty solid game, but they have a lot of mediocrity throughout this team, and it's clearly led them to this 0-5 record.
Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, Zach, their season is over, especially with these injuries to Beckham and Brandon Marshall. They're both out for the year now. I mean, I just don't know where they go for any sort of playmaking ability. Eli Manning continues to just, struggle and throw interceptions. He throws an interception on the final drive of the game that seals it. And, when I look at the Giants, Zach, and I'm watching their game and they pan over and they show Ben McAdoo on the sideline, I think that's where this all starts. I truly just don't see Ben McAdoo as a NFL head coach. Like, Ben McAdoo is one, he's like hilarious looking. Like, remember last year he had like that part down the middle hairstyle with like the hair flopping down on both sides, still had the mustache. Now he like thinks he's like a mob boss and he's got like the hair slicked back. And it's just like he's more concerned about his hairstyle than like putting a good product on the football field. And look, I don't know where to start with the Giants and where he goes and where he starts to try and fix it because, look, and even the defense, which we thought this year was going to, potentially try and carry him, hasn't. You credit the Chargers, but, I mean, they're still nothing special. What's his face? Melvin Gordon had a very nice game. I had him in one of my leagues. He had 105 rushing yards, parlay that with 58 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Very nice day there. Rivers had himself a good day. So, look, the Chargers have been close. They had been close to getting a win, and they finally get one. And the Giants, well, we'll see you later. Better luck next year.
I'd expect them to be towards the top of the draft there.
They should
I wouldn't be surprised to see them go quarterback, even though they did draft, I think it was a 3rd round quarterback this year with Davis Webb. So
yep, from Cal. Yep.
I'd be interested to see, especially later in the season, if he can get some action and they see what they have in him, if they're ready to move on from Eli Manning at some point. It's going to be a lot of tough decisions on this team here this year with them continuing to have a rough season.
It's funny you bring that up because, like, you look around the league and look at some of these, older quarterbacks, and these, for the majority of them, the teams don't have any sort of plan in place for the replacement. I mean, look at Eli. Great example right there. There's no replacement there. You look at look at Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger. There's no replacement there.
Drew Brees is another.
Drew Brees is another. Look at him. There's no replacement there. Dallas was fortunate enough to fall into Dak Prescott, but he was a late round pick. If he doesn't turn into anything, who knows what their quarterback situation would be? So, there's a lot of teams out there that just don't have anything in place, and when these guys decide to retire or call it quits, they're going to be scrambling for a quarterback. If I was the Giants, if I was a Giants fan, I would have absolutely no problem investing a 1st-round pick in one of these quarterbacks that's coming out. I really wouldn't. This is a really good draft class. You're 0-5. You're probably going to have, at this point, it looks like you're well on your way to a top 5 pick. Why not invest in one of these guys? Really. You need to start playing around because you have playmakers, you have people on the outside, you have young guys, you have Beckham still, you have Sterling Shepard. Marshall Hill, he might call it quits after this year. Who knows? But, your core guys on offense are skill position-wise are talented. You need to get a quarterback, and you need to try and build up that offensive line. But would you have a problem with that if you were a Giants fan, taking a quarterback with your 1st-round pick?
I think that's the perfect idea to do because Eli Manning, he's 36 years old. We see Tom Brady's playing at over 40, so Eli could have a couple more years left. He's signed through 2019 as of right now, so it could be something that they bring in, kind of like we're seeing the Chiefs do right now with Pat Mahomes sitting behind Alex Smith. They bring in a top pick and let him sit behind Eli Manning for a year or two, see what Eli can do until he hits a point like we've already seen with Mitchell Trubisky getting his first start this week in Chicago. Give Eli Manning a chance like that. If they decide he deserves to be benched and they go with that young guy, then that's perfectly fine. I love that situation. I'm amazed teams don't do that more often, where they have an older quarterback and they start planning for their future already. The Chargers is another one. Phillip Rivers came in that same draft, and they don't really have any kind of replacement lined up for him
Not at all. And that's definitely something they need to look at because so I get it. The NFL is such like you want to win that year. You don't want to think about 2 years down the road, but at some point you need to, and at some point you need to start thinking that way. The Eagles did it, and the Eagles did it well in acquiring Carson Wentz, and things are looking up for them. I think more teams need to follow that line and that way of doing things. But we'll see what happens. A lot of old quarterbacks in the league. It's going to be interesting to see where these teams go after they're gone.
I definitely agree. It's always interesting to see how teams handle that. And from that game, we'll move to another old quarterback. Carson Palmer takes his Cardinals against the Eagles and a major loss, 34-7. The Eagles just dominated, and I will let you handle this with your Eagles here.
Yeah, man, look, they just keep rolling. I mean, they're 4-1. Look, I get it. Their schedule hasn't been that daunting. We'll learn a lot about the Eagles Thursday night, I think. But even still, it's a Thursday night game. It's a short week. It is what it is. If they come out and lose by 10 points to the Panthers, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. But even still, getting back to this game, just a total team effort and a total domination by the Eagles. I mean, they jump out to a 21-0 lead. That was from the defense getting 2 3-and-outs early to the newly signed and brought back Kenyon Barner with 2 real nice punt returns, setting them up with great field position. And then the offense and Carson Wentz finding their stride, and he has 3 touchdown passes in the first quarter, and they really don't look back. And Carson Wentz has his best game as an Eagle. He throws for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. Just an all-around great game from Carson. The battle of the Carsons, he clearly won that one. And look, for me, Zach, a lot of people are talking about the Eagles' offense and Carson Wentz, and rightfully so. I mean, what he's doing in his second year, he's definitely making that big stride in his second year that you hope to see. But for me, it's the defense. I mean, what this defense is doing, 1, without Fletcher Cox, 2, without Ronald Darby. I mean, you get those 2 back, and there's possibility now that you might get Sidney Jones back towards the end of the year, another cornerback rookie guy they drafted from Washington in the second round who had a torn Achilles in his pro day. I mean, you bring those 3 back all at some point. I mean, this defense gets a lot better. And look, what they're doing, getting after the passer, they're creating some turnovers. The secondary is playing way better than I thought it would, especially the cornerbacks. So I'm excited for where this team's going and where I think they can go. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's obviously you take it as a week-by-week basis, but look, they completely dominated the Cardinals, and I'm interested to see that matchup on Thursday night against the Panthers and see if they can go in to Carolina and knock off another 4-1 team and, kind of make the statement that, look, I know we're young and I know we have a second-year quarterback, but hey, we're here to compete with the upper echelon teams in the NFC.
I'm very impressed with all around effort the Eagles get on their offense. I know you mentioned their defense, but Zach Ertz has been so good. They got touchdowns from Torrey Smith, from Nelson Aguilar, who I thought was done last year. A lot of people thought he was done. He had a terrible time even catching the ball. He's really come on for them as their number 3 receiver this year. And I've been impressed by them being able to spread the ball around. And then LeGarrette Blount on the ground, 74 yards rushing. They've really relied on him since that Darren Sproles injury. And this is a team I expected them to be better than last year. I thought it'd be more around 500. I know last year they started out hot and then really dropped off. I could see that happening, but I don't think to the same effect. I think this team is on the verge of being for real and can definitely be a strong playoff contender over the next couple of years.
Yeah, they started off 3-1 last year and subsequently dropped 2 of their next 3, I believe it was, and that kind of led the downward spiral. You're right. But yeah, it just kind of has a different feel this year. I mean, you have more playmakers on offense. The defense is playing better. It just has a different feel. Like when I go into games right now with watching the Eagles, like I feel better. Like last year it was so like, all right, let's just see Wentz progress and see him try to get better, and that's kind of where we were. This year it's a little different, and this year like one guy I think that's made a really big difference, who in the first couple weeks didn't really do much, but has really come on, and that's the guy you touched on, was LeGarrette Blount. And I think they're handling him very well. Like they're giving the younger guys carries early, the quicker, shiftier backs, and then when they have a lead or the game's tight, and they want to just pound on that defense, they bring in Blount, and he gets chunk plays, and it's really effective the way they're using him. So I'm interested to see how things play out for the Eagles. Obviously, I'm a little more confident than I was last year, and I think this is a team that can definitely get to the playoffs. I mean, you would agree with that, right? You could see them if they don't win the division. I mean, you have to remember. I mean, this team's a game and a half up in the division right now. They have a game and a half lead.
I could definitely see them as a playoff team. They've looked solid on both sides of the ball, like you mentioned. I like how they're not relying on just one thing. They've got their tight end working. They got their receivers spreading it around. And the running game's been solid as well. So I'm impressed. I think they're definitely a playoff team. And from that side of the ball, we'll head to the other real quick. This week, the Cardinals traded for Adrian Peterson. Do you care?
No. Look, we get to a point in sports where players are just a name. And I feel like that's where we're at with Adrian Peterson.
And he replaces another guy that's just a name as they cut Chris Johnson, who formerly had some incredible years, but is just not the same anymore.
I mean, granted, Adrian Peterson didn't get the touches in New Orleans. Look, he's a back that he needs 14, 15 carries to get into a rhythm and get going. But even still, I mean, I don't foresee him going into Arizona and giving them a huge shot in the arm and churning out 100 yards and a touchdown every week. I don't think he has it anymore.
I think he'll be better than Chris Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll definitely be better than Chris Johnson. I agree with you there, but I just think people see Adrian Peterson and they just expect too much right now. I mean, he's at the end of his career. He is what he is. Just accept it. I think Adrian Peterson is just a name right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of role he's going to have there. But no, when I found he was traded today, I was like, oh, okay. I thought he was going to get. I was like, I expected him to get traded. Didn't think about Arizona as a possible destination, but okay, let's see how it works out.
I feel like it makes sense for both teams, but it's fun because you don't see many trades in the NFL.
I didn't even look at the details, Zach. What did the Saints get in return for him?
They just got a conditional pick, so teams
just a conditional.
So
okay, it was just
it'll depend.
So it wasn't okay. So it just depends on performance. All right, gotcha.
So it'll be interesting. It's probably, if anything, it'll be some kind of low round pick.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine it's anything too significant since he was barely doing anything in New Orleans anyway.
Right.
From one Pennsylvania team, we'll head to the other Pennsylvania team. And from a good Pennsylvania team, we'll head to one who had a bad week with the Steelers losing 30-9 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this was disappointing for me because the Steelers, as we talked about, they have a terrible time playing away. They were home. And they got blown out by Jacksonville here. Just huge disappointment. But this is the team Jacksonville seems to want to be. Blake Bortles did not have to do much because he's had a rough time when he has. Threw for 95 yards and an interception, and they were able to dominate because Leonard Fournette, 28 carries, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns, produced through the air a little bit as well, had a reception for 3 yards, but just destroyed the Steelers there on the ground. There was absolutely nothing they could do about it. And that was the story of this game. They didn't even need Blake Bortles there. No matter how good Antonio Brown was, he had 10 receptions, 157 yards on an absurd 19 targets. He was hugely productive, but it wasn't close to enough. They lost by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, look, if I were to tell you that the Jacksonville Jaguars 5 weeks into the season lead the NFL in point differential, you probably would have said I was crazy. But they do. That's where we're at. And Jacksonville, they're strange because this is now the second week where they've had 1 or 2 defensive scores that really have kind of blown games open. Remember, they did that at the beginning of the year against the Texans, and now they do it this week against the Steelers. Zach, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rank this? Like 1 being least surprised, 10 being the most surprised. Like how surprised were you from this result?
This kicked me out of my survivor pool. I lost.
Did it really? Oh,
yeah,
man.
The Steelers. I think I counted it out. I want to say it was like 8 of us remaining that this game that lost on it. And there's something like 9 teams left at this point. So I would say a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Catching me by surprise in both ways. That it wasn't a Steelers win and that it was a Jacksonville blowout, that it wasn't close.
And that Ben Roethlisberger threw 5 interceptions,
Ooh.
2 of which were returned for touchdowns. He said after the game, people were questioning his interceptions and questioning his performance, and he flat out said, "Hey, maybe I just don't have it anymore." And I mean, he talked about retirement in the offseason. Maybe he's regretting that. Maybe he's definitely thinking about that again this season. So, and look,
see, I don't see that as much. Like, I could see myself in that situation. Like, I have a terrible game like that, and I don't want to go. And I remember that in high school. Like, I don't want some person that I barely know to come up to me and tell me good game when I just played a terrible game. Like, I don't want them to ask me questions. If I was in that scenario where I just had one of the worst games of my life and people are asking me questions, I'd be in like a fuck you mode too. And like throwing questions at me like, yeah, I'm done. Okay. Well, like, let's get this over with. Like, let me just throw out some sarcastic answers and be done. And I feel like I could see that from him. Like, I would not expect him to like quit on the team mid-season, 5 games into the season or anything like that to feel like he's done. I think it was a bad game. And I think they definitely have the ability to bounce back. They have the pieces in place. They have some good players, especially on offense. Their defense was pretty solid leading up to this game. But I don't put too much into what he said about maybe he's finished, anything like that. I know he did talk about retirement over the offseason, but I'm not that concerned with Roethlisberger and this Steelers team.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little concerned. You have a home loss to the Jaguars, and you had a road loss to the Bears, who, look, you saw the Bears last night. I mean, they're just not a very good football team. So you have 2 losses to 2 teams you probably should have beaten. And look, the inconsistency is an issue. You want to have a game like this every once in a while, like, maybe twice a year. You've had 2 of them in the span of 5 weeks. That worries me a little bit. But you're right. Like, the amount of talent there, it should eventually come back and kind of even itself out. But the last thing I want to say about this game, Zach, did you see the highlight of Leonard Fournette? It was a handoff he took, and he got around the edge, and basically he was like calling people on to like hit him. Did you see that?
I missed that one,
dude. I'll have to send it to you if I remember. He basically he gets the handoff and he comes around right edge, and the safety for the Steelers, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Adams. No, not Adams. What is his name? Anyway, so they're basically coming, like, getting ready. Mike Mitchell, that's his name. That's who it is, Mike Mitchell. And Fournette's basically sizing him up and sees him, and he basically just like waves him on, like, let's go, bring on the contact. And they both just kind of lower their shoulder, and it's a big collision, and they both get up and are jawing to each other. And it's just like, I really like watching Leonard Fournette run the football. Like, he's made for the NFL. And it's fun to watch, and I'm excited to watch Leonard Fournette going forward. I have him on one of my fantasy teams, so I'm a little biased right now because of the week he just had for me last week. But nonetheless, he's a fantastic running back.
You always love to see that kind of attitude and that kind of aggressiveness at any level of football. I was talking to one of my friends the other day who was saying he'd love to coach his son's football team, and he'd just make a bunch of goons that just want to go hit people.
Yeah.
That was his way of phrasing it. But I love that. That's exactly what you want at any level of football. Someone that wants that contact. They want that competition. They want somebody to challenge them, and they're ready to overcome it, and they have that ability. Right. And Leonard Fournette proved it this week. So impressive from a young rookie running back like that.
Especially, too, in a day and age where we're so worried about head injuries and all that stuff that goes with the contact of the game. It is pretty cool to see these guys bring on and welcome the contact.
So we'll stay within their division and head to the other 3-2 team there, the Baltimore Ravens, who won 30-17 over the Raiders in a game that it wasn't really the Raiders. They didn't have their starting quarterback, Derek Carr. But the Ravens at 3-2 continue to make me feel like they don't belong. This is not a 3-2 team. Every time I see them, Mike Wallace did have a monster game here. He only had 3 receptions, 133 yards. He's not getting – that was on 3 targets. He's not getting that many looks. He had a good week last week against Pittsburgh. I felt like that was more because he was playing his former team. They were trying to feed him. And I don't see this continuing. I feel like it's a 1-week kind of thing. On the other side of the ball, talking about disappointing receivers, Amari Cooper, 1 catch for 8 yards. I know I benched him in one of my fantasy leagues for Tyrell Williams, who didn't even have a good game, but clearly better than 8 yards. So it's both of these teams at a rough point right now. Buck Allen led the Ravens in rushing, 73 yards and a touchdown. Alex Collins also got some good yardage for him. He got 12 carries, 55 yards, averaged more yards per carry than Buck Allen. He's had a couple issues with fumbling, which is the only reason he's probably not playing more. But Oakland still excites me when they have Derek Carr. This Baltimore team is just playing above their head right now to me. That's what I think every time I see them, even when they have this winning record.
Yeah, I think Baltimore would just kind of continue to be a 500 team the rest of the way. Win 1, lose 1, win 2, lose 2. Like, that's just kind of what I think they'll be. They called Oakland at a rough time right now without their starting quarterback. They jumped on them early, and EJ Manuel just wasn't going to bring them back. And Oakland, look, they're saying that Derek Carr is going to play on Sunday, which this was supposed to be like anywhere from a 4 to 6 week injury, and he's only going to miss 1 game. That's that makes me scratch my head a little bit and hoping for Derek Carr's sake and his health that they're not making the wrong decision here and he doesn't get hurt even worse. So it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back from this injury and how Oakland bounces back going forward. This is a team, Zach, that you and I both projected to go to the AFC Championship game, and they're 2-3 right now, so they need to pick it up. And I think they're definitely capable of doing it, but they need to figure it out quick.
Yeah, I don't feel nearly as good with them right now. I know Marshawn Lynch did have a touchdown. Michael Crabtree had a touchdown, but they need another weapon. And Amari Cooper, what he's doing right now, he's such a talented young receiver, but he's had his trouble with drops. They barely looked at him. He only got 2 targets this past game. They've got to get something else going to really be up there with the playoff teams, with some of the top teams in the league like we thought they would be going into this season.
Absolutely.
Seattle versus the LA Rams will be up next, and these are 2 teams that are now both 3-2 with winning records within their division. Seahawks pulled out this game 16-10. Some of the highlight players for me, we had Jimmy Graham scored a touchdown. He had 37 yards, so not a huge game there. Seattle has an interesting collection of running backs. They're getting some carries to different guys. Nobody really stood out this game. Eddie Lacy had 9 carries for 19 yards. Thomas Rawls, 8 for 20. They've got to get something figured out there in that backfield. They got a little bit of action to J.D. McKissick, he got 3 receptions for 36 yards out of the backfield. He's kind of taken more of a receiving role. But this is Seahawks. They're barely beating the Rams. They're definitely disappointing compared to where I thought they'd be. On the other side of the ball, the Rams, Jared Goff had probably his worst game of the season so far. No touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He threw for 288 yards. They just could not get the ball to their number 1 receiver. Sammy Watkins had 4 targets, didn't catch any of them, didn't really get anything going. And their leading receiver ended up being Tyler Higbee with 4 catches for 98 yards. That's just not going to get it done moving forward. They've definitely outplayed all the expectations for them. And this is a good competitive game for them against what was thought to be a top team in the NFC. So it's good to see that. but they still need more consistent production there on their team outside of Todd Gurley, where he had somewhat of a down week and nobody else was able to pick it up for that team.
Yeah, it looks like these are going to be the two teams in this division that are going to battle it out, because San Francisco and Arizona they're pretty much done and 5 weeks in, barring some sort of miraculous turnaround. It looks like these two teams will battle it out, and it'll be interesting to see if the Rams can hang on and continue to be relevant week after week. And look, credit Seattle for shutting down the Rams on the road, because say what you want about the Rams, they were the highest scoring team average-wise week by week coming into this matchup, and they only scored 10 points. Probably should have scored more. Really had some missed opportunities. I think if they're the Rams, if you're Sean McVay and you're the players inside that locker room, you probably feel a little slighted, and you probably feel like you probably should have won that game. Todd Gurley fumbles at the goal line. He fumbles as he's reaching out to break the pylon, and the ball hits the pylon. There be it a touchback, gives the ball to the Seahawks. And then on the last play, second to last play of the game, Jared Goff makes a great throw down the seam to rookie wide receiver Cooper Kupp, who is a possession receiver. He's a slot receiver, and the ball hits him in the hands. It's a tough catch, but, I mean, you're a wide receiver in the NFL. You need to make it and win the game for your team. And he drops it, and they lose. So 2 touchdowns that they left down the field. I'll be honest, I like what I see from the Rams more so right now that I see from the Seahawks. I like the Seahawks defense, don't get me wrong, but they're just so I don't know, like it's just so like blah. Like their offense is so stagnant this year so far, and like I said, I mean, they probably should have lost that game. So I'm interested to see how this plays out the rest of the year and see how these teams go back and forth, and who ultimately, because they have to play one more time, who ultimately wins the division.
Yeah, it's very fascinating because they're both with the same 3-2 record, but the Rams have outplayed their expectations. They're kind of on the upswing, whereas the Seahawks have downplayed their expectations and are less than what a lot of people thought. So it'll be interesting to see who's able to stay ahead there. I still expect it to be the Seahawks, just because they have some better talent, some better weapons, and I think clearly the better quarterback with Russell Wilson. But it'll be interesting to see, because he has not been what I expected him to be this year so far at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally right on that.
From there, we're going to Heartbreak Central here. My Dallas Cowboys in a tough loss against the 4-1 Green Bay Packers. 35-31. Got to give a quick shout out to my grandma's favorite player in the world, Cole Beasley, coming up with 2 touchdowns there for the Cowboys. Dez Bryant also got a touchdown for him. On the other side of the ball, there's Devontae Adams getting 2 receiving touchdowns. Jordy Nelson had a touchdown as well through the air. Just, I was impressed on both sides offensively. I was also depressed at my Dallas Cowboys defense. Just if you have a running back and you see they are matched up against the Dallas Cowboys in fantasy football, start him every week.
Yeah, no, seriously. I wanted to ask you, I was looking forward to this game because I wanted to ask you a question. I was interested to see your opinion on this, because I tweeted it out as soon as it happened, and I was actually at my parents' watching this game. My stepdad was actually out of town, so I was actually watching it. It's funny with my mom. She likes football, so she didn't mind watching the game either. She hates the Cowboys too, so we were both obviously pulling for the Packers. And I said it at the time too. So when Dak scored, right? When Dak makes a great read option, keeps it, goes around left end and scores and walks in for the touchdown. Would you agree that he should have pulled a Brian Westbrook and went down at the 1 or 2 yard line and ran more time off that clock? Now, look, I know people want to say, well, Dia, what if he doesn't score? Like, what if they don't get in then? Then you look like an idiot. Stop. You're going to score. You're moving the ball at will. You have one of the best offensive lines in football. You have Ezekiel Elliott that very rarely ever gets no yards on a carry. If that's me, if I'm Jason Garrett, I'm telling them, if you get a clear run to the end zone, go down. Because I don't care if it's 1 minute or if it's 30 seconds. We cannot give Aaron Rodgers ample time to go down the field. We've seen it time and time again. You can't do it. You just can't. And it bit him in the butt. I think they made a huge mistake for how poor their defense was playing, blowing a 21-6 lead. They did themselves. In my opinion, the Cowboys lost that game when they scored the go-ahead touchdown. Now, that sounds weird to say, but that's my opinion. Where do you see it? Were you okay with him going in, or do you think he should have went down and they should have ran more time off the clock and took their chances on 1st and goal from the 1 yard line?
It's something I honestly hadn't considered at all until you bring it up, of him going down to the 1 yard line like that memorable time Brian Westbrook did for the Eagles. It would have been a smart play. I think as a player, that's so hard to do. You just have that opening, you see that touchdown, and you want to get in. And I fully understand that. I know I see all the time when basketball is my number one sport, and you see in basketball, teams, they'll try and waste time at the end of clock and end up kind of getting out of their rhythm. They don't take shots they'd normally shoot, and end up giving their lead away through getting out of that rhythm and not doing what got them that lead. So in that aspect, I'm happy with him getting into the end zone. I don't think there's really a wrong decision there, whether you score a touchdown, whether you go down at the 1. Obviously, it didn't work out there. Their defense has got to be better. We talked about it a couple weeks ago with Tom Brady, that at the end of the game when they played the Texans, Tom Brady gets the ball. You just feel like it's his comeback to make, and he was going to do it, and that's exactly what happened. It's the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. He's up there at the top of the quarterbacks in the league, and I felt that way as well. Just couldn't be comfortable at it. Couldn't be comfortable at all with that. But it's so hard to think of that and to execute on getting there and just taking that knee, sliding, whatever it takes to down the ball there at the 1.
Sure. Yeah, and look, ultimately they end up losing the game, and they fall to 2-3, and the Cowboys they're struggling right now. There's no other way to say it, and they find themselves in third place in the division right now. And look, they need to get that defense figured out, because the offense is doing their job and the offense is scoring points. The defense just week after week, and started with that Denver game, and it's just kind of just snowballed, and they're giving up points in boatloads, and I'm not sure what they got to do to figure and get it straightened out, but they need to figure it out quick, because I mean it could get out of hand. I think the offense is talented enough to where they'll be okay. I don't think they're going to go on like a 4-game losing streak or anything like that, but the defense, man, you touched on in the beginning of the year in our preview that you thought last year was kind of an anomaly, and you thought that they were going to struggle this year, and you were right.
I agree. They got to figure out something on defense. I felt so much better since that Denver game with their offense. This game felt like a real return for Ezekiel Elliott. He didn't have a great yards per carry, but still had 116 yards on the ground. I was happy to see that. I like how Bryce Butler's been involved. He hasn't been any kind of superstar or anything like that, but he consistently makes 1 to 2 plays every week that they really, really need. He had a long 49-yard reception in this game, which made up most of his 57 yards for the game. And that was a big play, even though he didn't get into the end zone this week. Des Bryant got into the end zone. Like I said, Cole Beasley getting 2 touchdowns. They have different aspects of their offense working. Dak Prescott's looked good, even though he had that pick 6, which was unfortunate. I've been happy with it.
Wasn't his fault, though.
Yeah.
Ball was dropped.
I feel so much better. That Denver game, their offense looked miserable. They just couldn't get anything going. Since then, they've looked better, so I've been happy there. They got to get something working differently on that defensive end to do anything. Aaron Jones just destroyed them. And that's someone I brought up last week as one of my Dalvin Cook replacements I was looking at with him. Fortunately, I got him in 2 leagues. One of them I didn't have Dalvin Cook anyway, but I added him. So that that was nice to have the 125 yards and touchdown there. So a little bright spot on my miserable day of watching the Cowboys blow that lead at the end of the game. So I'm done talking about that game. Hopefully
Zach,
they'll come back.
But Zach, it's not all bad, my friend.
I agree.
They get San Francisco this week, so they should bounce back and get on the winning track. Okay,
that's the expectation. If for some reason they lose there, then there's some major alerts going on right there with that team and the help they need. But hopefully they can bounce back and pull out a game against the winless 49ers.
I think they'll be all right.
From there, we'll go to the Chiefs and Texans. Chiefs remain undefeated. They're now 5-0. Texans dropped to 2-3. The final score of this, the Chiefs won 42-34, but it was not that close of a game at all. There was some late scoring there by Houston, including their final touchdown with no time left on the clock. Big performer here for the Chiefs. Kareem Hunt continues to be fantastic. He had 107 yards rushing. Travis Kelce, 98 yards receiving. Tyreek Hill had a punt return touchdown in addition to 68 receiving yards. So those were some of the standouts there for Kansas City. DeAndre Hopkins, we've talked about him repeatedly.
Wait, you didn't even talk about Alex Smith.
Oh,
he was their best player.
He's really, really impressed me this year. I always felt like he was so mediocre. But yeah, you're exactly right. I skipped over him with some of the
stat line is unbelievable.
He had 324 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, only got sacked 1 time, 78% completion percentage. Just, I fully agree. He also had 19 yards rushing to add to that. Fantastic. Started the entire season by Alex Smith. He would, really, really stood
If the
out.
season ended now, he would. I feel fully comfortable saying this. He probably would be the MVP. I don't know who else you would pick. I mean,
Kareem Hunt on that same undefeated team, he could be in the running there.
I mean, he's completed 121 of 158 passes for almost 1,400 yards, 11 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Through 5 games, he's the best player in football. There's no one else that's having a better season than Alex Smith right now. You hit the nail in the head. I said for a long time he was just like an average quarterback, like a game manager. Just don't turn the ball over and keep it close. But he's really kind of taking that next step to being a fantastic quarterback. Maybe the whole drafting Patrick Mahomes in the first round and moving up to getting – maybe that lit a fire under his ass. I don't know. But he's playing absolutely fantastic. And as did his counterpart, did Deshaun Watson. He's turning heads as well. 5 touchdowns again.
Yeah, monster stats there by Deshaun Watson. Another thing with Alex Smith that impresses me is – his receivers are not that great. He's got a fantastic tight end in Travis Kelce. He's got an explosive player in Tyreek Hill, although I'd still have a hard time really saying he's a number 1 receiver. Like he is on that team.
On their team, yeah.
Yeah, but he's more of a role player. Like I said, he had the punt return touchdown there. He makes those big plays. But he's not someone they rely on for high volume. He only had 6 targets there. And then their number 2 receivers, Chris Conley, who I'm almost positive this is his best game of the season, 46 yards, no touchdowns, only 3 targets for him as well. And then they've got a mess of other guys that got a couple targets, 2, 3 targets, 1 or 2 catches. Demetrius Harris had 3 catches, 21 yards. That's the next guy up there. So he doesn't have incredible weapons that really stand out either, which makes his run even more impressive. Yeah,
absolutely, man. Completely agree with you. And it's crazy what he's doing. And it's going to be look, they're still undefeated, and they're the last undefeated team in football, and they're the best team in football right now. So, Big Red's got it going on in Kansas City.
For sure. Very impressive. And real quick, Houston's receivers had monster stats here with DeAndre Hopkins, 52 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then Will Fuller had 57 yards and 2 touchdowns. So 5 touchdowns between their top 2 receivers. They clearly really like having Will Fuller back.
They do.
He had some good plays the week before, and that's definitely been a benefit for him. And DeAndre Hopkins continues to get monster targets, 12 targets again this week, even though he only had 4 receptions. And that's what you got to do with this guy. Such a great athlete. He's just –
Think about this.
This is what he needed all last year. Give him the ball.
Think about this. The University of Clemson at one point had DeAndre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, and Martavis Bryant on their roster at one point. All on the field at the same time. That's crazy.
All starting NFL receivers. That is wild.
That's crazy.
From there, we'll move to our last game of the week that we'll cover. That is the Vikings and Bears game from last night. The Vikings moved to 3-2 with a 20-17 victory over the Bears, and the Bears are now 1-4. The thing that caught my attention, I checked in on this game last night. At halftime,
yep,
I had to check if I was accidentally looking at a baseball or a hockey score because halftime is 3-2.
Yep.
3-2. I've never seen that score in my life.
It was crazy. It was crazy. I mean, it was crazy. And it obviously opened up a little bit more in the second half. But, a real sloppy game. Not one of the better games to watch. I kind of watched a little bit of it off and on. I was kind of dozing off late in that game. And I obviously kind of wanted to tune in just because of Mitchell Trubisky. And I kind of wanted to see what he had. He looked okay. I saw some people saying he looked really good. I saw some people say he looked terrible. I wouldn't agree with either one of those. I was just kind of neutral on him. He showed some good things. He also showed some, rookie mistakes with, 2 costly turnovers. And but he also doesn't have any wide receivers at all. Like he literally has no playmakers on that offense other than the running game, which obviously is beneficial. But when he drops back to throw, it's a struggle. So I thought he looked okay. It'll be interesting to see how he progresses the rest of the year. But yeah, all in all, I thought he was all right. The Vikings, though, Bradford starts the game, goes out, Case Keenum comes in and looks pretty good and cleans it up and gets the win. And if I'm Minnesota, I'm going with Case Keenum the rest of the year. I'm coming out this week and I'm naming Case Keenum my starter, and I'm putting all this BS aside. Sam Bradford's like an 80-year-old man. Would you agree with that? Like he's like so brittle. He gets knocked down. He looks like he got hit in the head with a baseball bat when he comes to. His like eyes are glazed over, and he's like, "Oh my God, like where am I?" Like it's like, all right, dude, enough. Like you need to just stop. Like you constantly get hurt. Like I'm so over Sam Bradford. I'm going to be honest. I am over seeing Sam Bradford be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I'm done with it.
I really have a hard time saying that, especially now it was against New Orleans, but the first game of the season that he played, he went 27 of 32. He threw for 346 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He had a monster game, and he can still do that. He's still a starting
when he's healthy and when he has a clean pocket. But here's the problem, Zach. That very rarely happens. You get that like twice a year. The rest of the time, this is the NFL, okay? You're going to have to make throws with guys bearing down on you. That's just the reality of it. Like, I'm sorry. I'm done with Sam Bradford. I saw him in Philly plenty. And now when I'm seeing in Minnesota, all I know is I am so glad, and I'm going to I sent him a Christmas card last year. I'm sending him one again this year. GM Howie Roseman for the Eagles for getting a first-round pick for that bum, because I don't know how he did it and how he got Minnesota to take the bait, but kudos to him because Sam Bradford is not worth a first-round pick.
That was an incredible trade by the Eagles. I was very impressed at the way they hustled the Vikings. The Vikings were in a situation, though, where they still had a solid team and just needed that quarterback with Teddy Bridgewater.
That's the problem.
For the
Would you agree they have, I don't want to say a Super Bowl roster, but they definitely have a roster of a playoff team that could, who knows, make a run, right? I mean, the defense is fantastic, and they have playmakers.
It's not on the same level since they lost Dalvin Cook, but Jerick McKinnon
Right.
had a good game last night against Chicago. Even though Chicago is kind of a poor team, it's hard to really see how that's going to register against more competitive teams. But he had 95 yards and a touchdown on the ground, another 51 yards receiving through the air. Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs have been good this year. They have the pieces. Their defense has been great for the last couple years.
Yep.
They do have those pieces, and that's why they made that move last year for Sam Bradford. It'll be interesting to see what they do at that quarterback position. I think it'll be better
What would
for
you
them.
do? What would you do?
I think it's going to be better for them if they give Sam Bradford that time to get 100%. Let Case Keenum's had some good games here as a starter. Let him continue to start over the next couple weeks. If he hits a point, if Sam Bradford's back to close to 100% and Case Keenum has some struggles, anything like that, sure, put Sam Bradford back in. But he only was able to attempt 11 passes before coming out of the game last night. He clearly wasn't in a position to be back yet. So let him heal up, give him that chance. If they're struggling, give him another chance. But
if Keenum's playing,
I don't need him that significantly.
But if Keenum's playing well, you stick with him, right?
I think so. I think that makes sense.
Okay.
But I could see it either way because Bradford started out so well that first week and really, really looked good, really made that Vikings offense look good. Part of it that I'd be suspicious of is they were playing that bad Saints defense. But
I'm done with him. I'm done with him. I'm done. I'm done with Sam Bradford.
I'm still not. Now, from my experience as a Cowboys fan with Tony Romo, there is no better feeling than having two starter quality quarterbacks on the roster. There's just to have Case Keenum come in and be able to be that good, so much better than having the mess of Brandon Weeden and all the other nonsense the Cowboys put in for years when Tony Romo would get hurt. Mark Sanchez. Oh, I watched him when he was in the Jets there. I went to school just below New York.
Trust me, I watched him. Too. He was on the Eagles for a time period too. I remember.
So bad. Bad.
Right.
All right, that wraps up all the games we're going to cover. The games we kind of skipped over, we weren't real interested in some of the teams playing. The Jets moved to 3-2 with a 17-14 win over the Browns. 49ers lost to continue their losing streak. They're 0-5. They lost 26-23 in overtime against the Colts. And then the Dolphins won 16-10 against the Titans without Marcus Mariota. None of those games really stood out that we really wanted to cover anything. Did you want to mention anything else from any of those three games?
Not really. The only thing that I think kind of stands out to me, nothing really on that Tennessee-Miami game. Miami stinks. They won. I get it. One of their touchdowns on a defensive score, kind of a fluke. But Miami stinks. Tennessee, tough without Mariota. Not much on that game. The Cleveland Jets game, kind of surprised that the Jets have 3 wins already. That's pretty wild. I know a lot of people in the betting community that took Jets team total under, which is probably about to lose here soon if it hasn't already. And then with San Francisco is interesting because San Francisco, look, they haven't won yet, but they're getting really close. They're getting all of their losses seemingly to just to be by like 2 or 3 points. It's crazy. So they're eventually going to get one. I'm not going to lie to you, man. If I was a Cowboys fan, I'd be a little concerned. Not saying they're going to lose, but having to go out to San Francisco, play a desperate San Francisco team, those trips are tricky. But Dallas should win, but I'm just saying those trips are a little tricky. I hate playing teams that don't have wins. I hate it. It just weird things can happen.
I could see that. I still feel like the Cowboys should be able to handle it fine. And
sure.
they're a bounce back candidate anyway after taking that loss to Green Bay. I figure I'd be amazed if they'd come out kind of,
and that's the thing,
not ready to play.
Sure.
So heading into next week, what games stand out to you to keep an eye on here?
Yeah, look, obviously, for me, I start things out on Thursday night with the Eagles at Carolina. Battle of 2-4-1 teams, one of the better matchups on the week 6 slate. That's definitely going to be interesting to see how both teams fare. And it sucks 'cause I wish this game was on a Sunday or a Monday night because I hate the short weeks. I don't think you get each team's best shot. But either way, should definitely be a good Thursday night game. And then another game that kind of jumps out to me, which is a game I said to you, which was the Rams at Jacksonville, a battle of two teams that in the beginning of the year you saw this matchup and you were probably like, yeah, I won't spend too much, if any time, watching or looking into that game. But all of a sudden that becomes a pretty interesting matchup. 4:00 kickoff out there in Jacksonville between two teams that have really surprised so far this year. What about you? What matchups are catching your eye?
I also had the Eagles-Panthers. I think that's two teams that have positioned themselves there at the top of the NFC, and that should be a good battle. And then Lions and Saints interest me. Two good offenses playing against each other. And then Steelers and Chiefs, the undefeated Chiefs, worth watching. I've watched them quite a few times this year. They're very good on both sides of the ball. The Steelers, after a terrible game against Jacksonville, we'll see how they bounce back. If they continue to be awful and it's a blowout, or if they can hang with one of currently the best team in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. Both them games I'm interested in as well. Obviously, Pitt and Kansas City kind of speaks for itself. Zach, I'm going to give you an over-under here. You tell me if the number is going to be over or under. I'm going to go total passing attempts in Detroit, New Orleans. I'm going to set the number at 80. Will we see over 80 combined passing attempts between Drew Brees and Matt Stafford? Or are you going to go under that total?
I am leaning towards the over. I'm going to say the over. Both of these, they're passing teams. They do that a lot. I'm going over.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of where my head would be at as well. Both these teams should kind of sit back there and wing it. It's in New Orleans on that fast track in the Superdome. So, I would lean over as well. But this game should definitely be interesting. I'm happy to finally get Breeze back in my fantasy league after he had his bye last week. So, there's definitely some good matchups next week, or should say this week now, in the NFL, week 6.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received, so we'd love to continue hearing your feedback. As we continue to build this platform with our podcast, it's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people you know that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.